Remember those desserts from Grandma's farmhouse kitchen, where every pie, cobbler, and cake was baked from scratch with simple ingredients? These 25 desserts were once Sunday staples, but today you almost never see them. Why are so many of these Southern treasures quietly fading from our family tables? Tomato soup cake. If you've never heard of tomato soup cake, you might be tempted to wrinkle your nose. But trust me, Southern kitchens swore by this Depression-era miracle. Canned Campbell's tomato soup got stirred right into the batter, giving the cake an unbelievably moist crumb and a subtle tang that no one could ever quite place. Folks didn't waste words explaining it. They just said it tasted spiced right. Mama might have tossed in cinnamon, cloves, and a good splash of vanilla, so by the time it came out of the oven, you'd never guess a can of soup was hiding in there. Cream cheese frosting or a dusting of powdered sugar turned it from a humble pantry trick into Sunday-worthy dessert. Neighbors would whisper, "Did you hear she made that soup cake again?" Like it was high society. These days, we've got bakery aisles bursting with mixes, but back then, tomato soup cake was the clever woman's secret weapon. Banana pudding. Few desserts say Southern mama quite like banana pudding. You'd find it layered in a Pyrex dish, vanilla wafers lined up like soldiers, bananas sliced thin, and silky pudding poured over in generous waves. The crowning glory was always the meringue, browned just enough to hold its peaks, though some mamas switched to Cool Whip once it came along in the 60s. Every spoonful was soft, sweet, and cold, the kind of thing you'd sneak from the fridge before supper, praying Mama wouldn't notice. Church socials, family reunions, or just an ordinary Wednesday night. Banana pudding showed up everywhere, and it never lasted long because someone was always cutting it just to even it out. Pineapple upside-down cake. Now here's a showstopper. Pineapple upside-down cake. Mama would melt butter and brown sugar in her cast-iron skillet, line it with those golden pineapple rings straight from the Dole can, and pop a maraschino cherry in the center of each one. When she flipped that cake out onto the platter, it was like magic. The caramelized pineapple glistened, the cherries winked bright red, and the smell was pure sunshine. It was the dessert you brought out when company came over, guaranteed to impress. Sometimes it was baked in a bundt pan, other times in that trusty skillet. But always sweet, sticky, and just a little messy when you cut it. If you saw pineapple upside-down cake on the table, you knew Mama had gone all out. Pecan pie. No Southern dessert list is complete without pecan pie. Corn syrup, sugar, eggs, butter, and a dash of vanilla. Simple as it sounds, it took a true Southern mama to get it just right. The pecans floated to the top and baked into a shiny, toasty crown, while the filling underneath set into that perfect custard-like goo. Some mamas swore by Caro syrup, others used sorghum if that's what was in the pantry. But either way, the pie disappeared slice by slice. Served warm with whipped cream or cold right from the fridge, pecan pie was always a treat worth saving room for. Even the crunch of the flaky crust was part of the experience. Today, you might see gourmet versions with chocolate or bourbon, but nothing tastes like the pie Mama pulled from the oven on Thanksgiving or Christmas. Texas sheet cake. This was the bring to every potluck cake. Texas sheet cake. Baked in a big rectangular pan, it was rich, moist, and covered in a glossy fudge-like icing that got poured on while still warm. Mama didn't bother with frills. She sliced it into squares and passed them around, knowing each bite was sweet enough to satisfy. Some called it Texas sheet cake, others just that chocolate cake Mama makes. It fed a crowd, and nobody ever turned it down. Sometimes chopped pecans or walnuts got sprinkled over the top, adding a little crunch. It wasn't fancy, but that was the charm. It was dependable, familiar, and tasted like love baked into cocoa. These days, boxed brownies might fill the gap, but back then, chocolate sheet cake ruled every dessert table. Strawberry poke cake. If you grew up in the 70s or 80s, You probably saw a strawberry poke cake cooling on someone's counter. Mama would bake up a white sheet cake, then poke it full of holes with the end of a wooden spoon. That's when the fun began. Strawberry jello, bright as a summer sunset, got poured right over the top, seeping down into every nook and cranny. Once it's set, she'd cover the whole thing with a thick cloud of whipped topping, sometimes with fresh strawberries scattered on top. Every slice showed off cheerful red stripes that made the kids' eyes light up. It wasn't gourmet, but it sure was cheerful, cool, and perfect for hot southern evenings. Cherries Jubilee. Now this was a dessert that felt downright glamorous. Cherries Jubilee was all about spectacle. Dark cherries simmered in sugar and brandy, then set ablaze at the table. When Mama made it, the flames danced high enough to make the children squeal and the adults laugh nervously. Served warm over vanilla ice cream, it was tart, sweet, and just a little bit grown up. Not every household made Cherries Jubilee, but when it appeared, it was the kind of thing you remembered for decades. It spoke of special occasions, anniversaries, or maybe just Mama showing off a bit. A true farmhouse woman would have admired the way something simple, cherries in a pan, turned into a memory that glittered brighter than any cake. Chess pie. Chess pie was the humblest of pies. Sugar, butter, eggs, and a spoonful of cornmeal. No fruit, no nuts. Just pantry basics baked into a golden brown slice of heaven. The filling was rich and custardy, with just enough texture to keep it interesting. It was the sort of pie you'd find on every farmhouse table because it didn't require anything fancy, just a steady hand and a hot oven. Mama might flavor it with a splash of vinegar or lemon juice to cut the sweetness, but the result was always the same. Simple, comforting perfection. Chess pie was proof that you didn't need much to create something worth gathering around. Ambrosia. If there was ever a dessert that divided families, it was ambrosia. Some loved it, some pushed it around on their plates, but it always showed up at Christmas or Easter. Coconut flakes, mandarin oranges, pineapple tidbits, maybe even miniature marshmallows if Mama had them. It was a fruit salad dressed up like dessert. Served chilled in a cut glass bowl, it looked like something out of a Southern Living magazine. Grandmothers swore by it, saying it was a tradition older than them. It wasn't about being fancy. It was about carrying on what the women before them had done, spooning up a little taste of sunshine in the middle of winter. Egg custard pie. Egg custard pie was a quiet kind of dessert. No showy frosting, no bright colors, just a simple golden custard baked into a flaky crust. The flavor was subtle. Eggs, milk, sugar, and a hint of nutmeg sprinkled over the top. It was smooth, silky, and best eaten slightly chilled, with a texture that melted right on your tongue. This was the kind of pie you'd see cooling on the counter on an ordinary Thursday night. A little treat, tucked in among the casseroles and biscuits. It didn't need to impress anyone. It just filled the house with comfort. And if anyone knew how to make comfort the center of every meal, it was Mama, following in the footsteps of generations of women who made do with the simplest of ingredients. Mississippi mud cake. If chocolate had a party in the South, Mississippi mud cake was the guest of honor. It was a rich, dense sheet cake, layered with gooey chocolate frosting, marshmallows, and sometimes even pecans. Mama baked it until the edges set, then poured that glossy frosting over while the cake was still warm, letting it sink into every crack and crevice. The marshmallows half melted into sticky little pockets of sweetness that made each bite a surprise. It was messy, indulgent, and named for the muddy banks of the Mississippi River, though most kids just called it heaven on a plate. When Mama brought out Mississippi mud cake, you knew it was a day worth remembering. Butterscotch pie. Butterscotch pie doesn't get enough credit these days, but back then, it was pure gold. The filling was rich and caramel-like, made from butter, brown sugar, and cream, cooked until it reached just the right thickness. Mama poured it into a homemade crust, topped it with a mountain of meringue, and baked it until the peaks turned golden. The smell alone was enough to stop you in your tracks. One slice, and you understood why Southern kitchens kept brown sugar stocked like treasure. A farmhouse woman would have called it the perfect example of turning kitchen staples into something that tasted like a holiday feast. Bread pudding. Nothing said resourceful like bread pudding. Mama would gather up leftover biscuits or day-old bread, cube them up, and soak them in milk, sugar, eggs, and a bit of spice. Raisins or pecans might find their way in, depending on what was in the pantry. Baked until golden and served with a drizzle of vanilla sauce or whiskey glaze, it was warm, filling, and just sweet enough. This dessert was born from thrift, but carried the weight of tradition. Every spoonful was proof that Mama never let good food go to waste. Some folks fancy it up in restaurants today, but nothing compares to the humble pan your mama pulled straight from the oven. Grasshopper pie. Now, here was a dessert that looked straight out of the 60s and 70s. Grasshopper pie. Bright green, minty, and as cool as an after-dinner cocktail, it was made with crème de menthe liqueur and a chocolate cookie crust. Mama didn't serve it every week. This one came out for company or holidays, when something a little different was called for. It had that playful retro charm, like a dish you'd see in a magazine spread alongside shag carpets and avocado-colored appliances. Sweet, refreshing, and just a little fancy. Grasshopper pie was proof Mama could keep up with the times. Lemon icebox pie. Few things cooled you off on a hot southern evening like lemon icebox pie. Mama would mix sweetened condensed milk, lemon juice, and egg yolks, pour it into a crumbly graham cracker crust, and chill it until it set firm. No oven needed, just a refrigerator and a little patience. The result was tangy, creamy, and refreshing, with a flavor that danced on your tongue. Some topped it with whipped cream, others with meringue. But either way, it was gone before you knew it. This was one of those desserts every farmhouse woman loved. Simple, quick, and perfect for keeping the family smiling when the heat refused to let up. Coca-Cola cake. Only in the South would someone look at a bottle of Coca-Cola and think, now that'll make a fine cake. And they were right. Mama would mix the soda right into the batter, along with cocoa powder and buttermilk, until it baked into the fluffiest chocolate cake you ever tasted. The cola added sweetness and just enough fizz to make the crumb tender. But the real magic was the frosting. Poured over the cake while it was still warm, it turned glossy and almost candy-like, soaking into the top layer. Coca-Cola cake wasn't just dessert. It was Southern pride baked into a pan, showing off the region's most famous drink in the sweetest way possible. You couldn't call yourself a true farmhouse woman if you didn't know how to turn an everyday bottle of Coke into something that made the whole house smell like Sunday afternoon. Hummingbird cake. Hummingbird cake is the showpiece of Southern baking. Bananas, pineapple, cinnamon, and pecans, all stirred together in one glorious batter, then frosted with thick cream cheese icing from top to bottom. Mama didn't make this one every week because it took a little more time. But when she did, you knew it was a special day. Some say it got its name because the cake was so sweet it could attract hummingbirds. Others just say it's because folks hummed with happiness after the first bite. Towering and beautiful, it often appeared at weddings, birthdays, and family reunions, standing tall among all the pies and puddings. Every slice was moist, fragrant, and packed with flavor. Today you might see it on fancy bakery menus, but back then, hummingbird cake was a Southern mama's masterpiece, served with pride and a whole lot of love. Buttermilk pie. Buttermilk pie was humble, but it never disappointed. With eggs, sugar, butter, and buttermilk whisked together, it baked into a custard-like filling with just a hint of tang. Mama would sprinkle a little nutmeg on top and pull it from the oven when it was just set, still trembling slightly in the middle. It wasn't a pie that shouted for attention, but it always delivered comfort with every bite. It tasted like the memory of simpler times, sitting at the table with the windows open, listening to cicadas, and savoring a slice after supper. Buttermilk pie proved that you didn't need a pantry full of ingredients to make something worth passing down. It was one of those desserts that, like the women before her, Mama made with what she had and turned it into something downright unforgettable. Watergate salad. Now here's one with a story as colorful as its ingredients. Watergate salad was that pistachio-flavored fluff made with instant pudding, Cool Whip, canned pineapple, mini marshmallows, and nuts. Nobody's quite sure why it got its name. Some say it was dreamed up during the Watergate scandal of the 1970s. Others swear it came from the Watergate Hotel. Whatever the origin, it was a staple at church potlucks and holiday tables, sitting right next to the Jell-O molds and deviled eggs. Bright green and fluffy, it was as much conversation piece as dessert. Kids loved the marshmallows, grown-ups loved the creamy sweetness, and Mama loved that it came together in 5 minutes flat. Call it salad if you want, but everyone knew it was dessert in disguise, the kind of playful dish only a Southern mama could pull off with a straight face. Pecan pralines. If you've ever strolled the streets of New Orleans and caught the sweet smell of caramelized sugar, you know pralines. Mama made hers at home on the stovetop, stirring sugar, butter, and cream until it turned silky and golden, then folding in pecans before spooning the mixture out onto wax paper. They hardened into little rounds of nutty, sugary bliss. No thermometer? No problem. Mama could test the syrup by dropping a bit into water and knowing instantly if it was ready. Pralines were both candy and keepsake, wrapped up in wax paper or tucked into tins for Christmas gifts. Sweet, crumbly, and just a touch buttery, they melted in your mouth and stuck in your memory. Women of old would have nodded in approval, seeing modern mamas carry on the tradition of turning sugar and nuts into pure Southern magic. Jeweled divinity candy. Divinity wasn't just candy. It was a test of patience, skill, and maybe even faith. Mama would stand over the stove with her candy thermometer, boiling sugar syrup to just the right stage, then whipping egg whites until they stood tall. Slowly, carefully, she'd drizzle that hot syrup into the bowl while the mixer whirred, and like a small miracle, the mixture would turn fluffy and white as a cloud. To make it jeweled, she folded in bits of candied fruit or sometimes chopped pecans, each piece sparkling like little treasures. The candy set up in mounded swirls on wax paper, delicate enough to melt in your mouth, but rich enough to taste like Christmas morning. It wasn't the easiest recipe in the book, but a true pioneer woman loved a challenge. And when Mama managed to get the texture just right, not too sticky, not too dry, she'd beam with pride, as if she'd pulled off a feat of magic. Molasses cookies. Molasses cookies carried the taste of old kitchens and wood-burning stoves. Dark, spicy, and soft, they were flavored with ginger, cinnamon, and of course, that thick, sticky molasses that poured slower than honey. Mama would bake them until they cracked across the top, each bite chewy with just a little snap at the edges. The smell alone could stop kids mid-play and draw them to the kitchen like moths to a flame. Dipped in a glass of cold milk, they were comfort to find. These cookies have been around since olden days, a treat made from what was on hand. No chocolate chips, no frills, just honest sweetness. They tasted of tradition, of fall afternoons, of holidays where the kitchen was warm even if the weather wasn't. Coconut cream pie. Few pies looked as elegant as coconut cream pie. Mama would cook the custard on the stovetop, rich with milk and egg yolks, then fold in shredded coconut until it was thick and smooth. She poured it into a golden crust, topped it with meringue, and toasted coconut flakes until they turned a delicate golden brown. When she set it on the table, it shimmered like something out of a magazine. Each bite was silky, cool, and sweet, with that chewy coconut texture that lingered just long enough to make you want another slice. Coconut cream pie had a way of making an ordinary Sunday feel like Easter. To this day, it remains a pie that demands a little extra effort, and proves Mama's kitchen was nothing short of paradise. Apple Betty. Apple Betty was the kind of dessert that felt both humble and hearty. Layers of sliced apples, sugar, and cinnamon were topped with buttery crumbs or cubes of bread, then baked until bubbling and golden. It didn't need a crust or a fancy finish, just a scoop of vanilla ice cream melting over the top to make it shine. Mama would pull it out of the oven on cool evenings, the smell of cinnamon drifting through the whole house, promising comfort. It wasn't flashy like layer cakes or meringues, but it had soul. A true Southern woman would have recognized it as thrift at its finest, stretching a few apples into something that could feed a whole family with joy. Apple Betty proved dessert didn't have to be complicated to feel homemade and comforting. Rice pudding. Rice pudding was dessert born from leftovers. Yesterday's rice transformed into something creamy and sweet. Mama would simmer it with milk, sugar, vanilla, and a sprinkle of cinnamon, stirring slowly until it thickened into pure comfort. Sometimes raisins were stirred in, sometimes not, but always there was that cozy smell filling the kitchen. Served warm in winter or chilled in summer, rice pudding was as versatile as it was dependable. It was the kind of dish that felt like a hug in a bowl, simple enough for a weekday supper, but good enough to end a Sunday dinner. Rice pudding tied together generations, pioneer kitchens, farmhouse tables, and Southern mamas all stirring that same pot, making the most of what they had, and ending up with something sweet enough to satisfy everyone. And there you have it, 25 farmhouse desserts from your Southern mama's kitchen. From thrifty tomato soup cake to elegant coconut cream pie, each one carried with it not just sweetness, but the memory of kitchens filled with laughter, clinking spoons, and the steady rhythm of women who knew how to turn the simplest ingredients into magic. These desserts weren't just recipes, they were heirlooms, passed down from hand to hand, generation to generation. And even if today we lean on store-bought shortcuts, nothing will ever taste quite as sweet as Mama's desserts, made with time, love, and a good dose of Southern know-how.